Hi, it's Garth Davis here, the owner of Property Powerhouse, and I'm here today with Jamie Horner, the principal of Empire Strata Management. We've just had a lot of changes in the Strata Management Act just come in, Jamie, and I think it's been one of the largest pieces of legislation in WA. So can you sort of untangle it for us, and as in layman's terms, as investors and property owners, what does it all actually mean to us?
Thanks, Garth, for coming in. I must admit that if there were probably any photos seen of me earlier this week, I was a bit like this. We've had quite a few pages to digest, 400 pages of legislation as well as a few hundred pages of regulations. But today, let's just do a quick, 5 minute for people on the 6 key changes. So getting straight into it. It's been well run by Landgate. So Landgate have been big on consulting with everyone. It's been in the making for 2 years, Garth. I think the biggest push, if we can look at it, is Strata's supposed to be clearer and fairer. It's been 24 years in the making. Strata Titles Act was written in 1985. We had a review in 96. So some of the simple things that we're going to take for granted is the fact of email. In 1985, we didn't quite have email, so it allows things like those simple things we take for granted these days to become part of the Act. We can do our calls by phone, by Zoom, all those sort of things. So it's one of the biggest changes and definitely needed. Okay, so if we're going to go into the 6 key items, Garth, I'm going to quickly go through the first 4 because I don't think that the first sort of 3 really affect owners. Number 1 is the introduction of leasehold strata, and number 2 is the flexibility for developers to have more staged developments. So we don't have any community titles in WA at the moment. It's something that is prevalent in other states, and what it allows us to do, Garth, is it allows us to do multi-tiered staged subdivisions. It gives the developer more flexibility, and you don't have to have the traditional tenure green title, strata title. We've got leasehold title as well, which can range from 20, I think, to 99 years. So that's definitely more something that sits in the developer space, and post-corona, I think we're all looking for different ways of living in strata communities. We need that health, we need that well-being, we want to see developments that definitely have a bit more flair, diversity, and I think these really help developers in giving the community probably what it needs. Point 3, again, will barely affect many people, but dispute resolution is supposed to be made simpler. It definitely is, because the Act has much more items that are explained in detail. But I also think too, Garth, I don't know about if you've ever been at SAT Tribunal or not. I think I've only ever been there once. How about you?
No, I haven't, but maybe just explain for some others. What does SAT stand for?
State Administrative Tribunal. So in the past, most strata disputes can be very simple. Unfortunately, Jane and Bob don't necessarily like living next door to each other, and they can go to the tribunal. I do find it's a much more relaxed. The court requirements are there, but it's more relaxed than sometimes being at a magistrate's court. So all disputes now will go to SAT Tribunal. However, in the past there were not many that actually went to the magistrate's court, a small percentage. So they're the 3 changes, but if we're going to run into the 4th, the next one is supposed to be what this is about, so scheme termination. Garth, you might have some investors that have bought 20 or 30 years ago, and the buildings are getting a bit run down, they haven't used land to their highest and best use. And what they want to do is, we call it terminate, but what they really want to do is look to demolish that scheme and rebuild it or on-sell it to a developer for a more higher use. In the past, we've required unanimous decision. So we've required all people in there to agree, which can sometimes be tough. So the new legislation is supposed to help us. I must admit though, Garth, we've gone from 2 pages on termination to more than 200. Wow. So we're probably going to get a little bit convoluted, but what we are hoping is people can come to a resolution in a more simpler way to say it is in the best interest to terminate this scheme and build something that benefits everyone, meets current community needs rather than what was built 30 or 40 years ago.
So Jamie, that could be where there may be 20 apartments or 20 townhouses on a allotment of land, and they are getting old and it's time to rejuvenate or to build something. So before, as you say, we would have need 20 out of 20. to get agreement. So even 19, it wouldn't have happened. But now there is some new rules to redevelop that site. Would we still need 20 out of 20? Or
No, you can, depending on how many lots there is, when there's less than 4, you do need 100%. But more than 4, I think we're roughly down to 75%. Like I said to you, the only problem is going to be the hundreds of pages they've decided to put in this regard. But you're right, you know, we have a strata management complex in Peninsula Road in Maylands, and the houses or the units take up about 10% of the block, and the rest of it is just spare land. You know, that's not at its highest and best use. Okay, so let's get into the key ones. Better buyer information. So I think that's the biggest one for everyone. When you're buying into a strata complex, I must admit, I had an owner last year who didn't know they bought a strata. So when they actually got a strata invoice from us, they had a heart attack. They said, I bought the house, it's freestanding. Why are you sending me strata levies? And again, I don't know what disclosures were happening in that sale, but now the new disclosure statement, Ree was just put it out, Garth, I think you've had a look at it. It's over 10 pages, so it's going to give people more information about how that strata's running. Do they have enough money? Do they not? Those sort of questions. It's up to you whether you want to read it all, but at least it's been provided to you so you can make a better decision on what you're buying into. Okay, let's talk about the big one. So, like I said to you, 1985, 1996, we've had some big changes. So, if I could summarise them, we're going to have better bylaws. They're not called Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 anymore. They're called governance and conduct, so how we conduct ourselves. But also, too, we can't have unconscionable bylaws. You can't say, Joe can't come on here, a cat can't come on here. They have to be fair. And if you are making changes to your bylaws, you will need to consolidate them and to make sure they're fair, and there's a process for that as well. Scheme management should be easier. I know this sounds weird, but in the last act, everyone had to meet to make a decision, and we do know that decisions these days are made by email, so it's just those simple things. Big one is going to be strata managers. So a lot of people think the strata manager is the strata company. This is the first time we've actually been recognised as the act. The strata company are the owners, and the strata manager is different, and they have brought in some regulations in relation to strata managers that they will need some, I'm going to call it quasi-education. It's something like 8 units of a course to be a strata manager. However, they haven't gone far enough, which I don't know if that would be a concern for some owners. And then we've got some other things. If you're over 10 lots or your building whole complex is worth more than a certain amount, we've got some 10-year maintenance plans and some reserve funds. But there's quite a lot in there. There's more than 500 pages, so there's a lot to absorb. So Garth, are there any questions about the changes?
Yeah, I think, Jamie, a really important thing as a property owner and a property investor is we want to know, one, do we think that there will be now increases in strata fees? So is this going to make it more expensive for us, is the one thing. And secondly, is this an opportunity now where there's some very good strata managers out there, but if we had a property where we felt we may want to have a change or look at having a change in a strata manager, is this a good opportunity now to explore that?
So first thing with levies, Garth, is I do think that they might go up. And the reason why they might go up is because if you haven't had an insurance valuation, or you do need a 10-year plan, or you need to establish a reserve fund. But they're positives because they are things that protect your complex statutory and move it in the right direction. The way that you can look at, well, what are the other things I can change? Because we are now recognised as strata managers in the Act, there is actually a clear termination process. So if you weren't happy with your strata manager, there's a clear termination process, and all new strata contracts do need to be rewritten over the next 6 months. So you've got a perfect 6-month window to really assess who you're choosing to be your strata manager.
And that's a great opportunity because you might just want to get a second opinion. As I say, some strata managers I'm sure are doing a wonderful job, but if you weren't that happy, it's a great chance just to get a second opinion on fees and how they operate. So how would people go about doing that if they wanted to explore getting a different strata manager? Is it a difficult process? And how do they have to speak with the strata, the Council of Owners? Is that what they do?
It's definitely still a majority decision. So the Council of Owners usually make that. If not, the owners as a whole can do it. In the past, I'd say, well, how long is your current contract for? But these days, at some stage over the next 6 months, they do need to be re-signed. I think the first thing will be is one, make a decision whether you're happy. check the fees that you're paying, and then check the fees of comparable real estate agents, ones with good reputation. And again, I think I accidentally said real estate agents, but the new laws, Garth, don't require strata managers to be licensed. The education requirements are extremely limited. There's a lot of money held in trust, and I don't think people realise that when you choose a real estate agent to manage a strata, you're getting a lot of protections, licences, educations, reporting, annual audit, as well as a fidelity fund guarantee. So I think, yes, but again, if you're happy with your strata manager, continue on, but it is the perfect time for assessment.
And what would you say would be some of the important things if someone was looking for a good strata manager? What do you think are maybe the top 3 things they should be looking at in a strata management business?
I think the first one would have to be if they're a real estate agent. I think you get that education, you get the demers licensing, you get the audit of the trust account, you get the fidelity fund. So you get, I suppose again, like choosing a financial planner, you get a whole host of education requirements as well as licensing requirements. Number 2, I do still believe in no lock-in contracts. You know, you don't want your building managed by someone who is not interested, like, you know, who you're just not getting along with, but you're stuck in a contract. And number 3, I would say ask around. I think reviews are important. You'll get a really good idea of whether that company's right for you.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much. I think there's a lot of really good information there. So well done and keep up the great work.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gar.